Today I got someone else with no hair. I got a little bit of hair, but this guy here does not have any hair at all. And his name is Nzuzo. Nzuzo, how's it going?
And good morning or good day to everyone. We really, really appreciate this opportunity to be with you today.
What does Nzuzo mean? Such a rare name. You are the first Nzuzos that I know. Other than you, there's no one else that I know whose name is Nzuzo. What does it mean?
You know, it's an excellent question to ask because it has to do with what you do. And the reason you do what you do is to get my name. And my name is Nzuzo, and it defines as a profit in literal terms, monetary terms, it's profit. But also in a humanitarian term, it's a gain. When you gain something, it's to gain. So by having me, you're saying I've gained, I have made Nzuzo of so much. That's the interesting part. So now when you see me, you're talking ching.
Yeah. I wonder who named you? Your parents or your grandparents?
My parents.
Okay. What was the thinking there? What was the thinking? Or the circumstance thereof? Because we know in African culture, it's always the child is given the name based on the circumstance or what is happening in that time. Hopefully, we don't have any kids that are going to be called COVID in the years to come.
Hey, unfortunately, there already are COVID. In my case, I believe that my father, had to say, had to pronounce things before they could happen. So when he named me, he was actually defying a situation that was happening because my parents had two other kids who passed away just at a very young, before they could even turn one. So they never made it. So, but then he went ahead and named me as a profit or a gain to the family to cement the position that they're not going to lose me, And the strange part about it is I was actually born, I'm a premature baby. So they were worried that I wasn't going to make it because I was born at home. I never went to the hospital. So you can imagine a premature 7-month baby not in hospital. Can you imagine what that's like in the rural areas? So I defied all the odds.
Come on, man. And where was you born?
I was born in a place called, it's by Hillcrest, it's called Kwangolosi. Now there's a Inanda Dam, a famous Inanda Dam that is there. That's where my home is, actually, originally. That's where I was born.
I've passed through there before, not totally in the homelands, but I've passed through there before. I know that area. I think it was in 2012, 13, somewhere there in one of my road trips. But yeah, good, man. And Nzuzo, so now we know where you're from. And other than that, what do you do?
What do I do? What do I do? It's not what I do, it's what I am.
Tell us.
Let me tell you what I am instead.
Well, we know you're the gain already, but maybe expand on the gain to who you are.
You see, okay, I'll tell you this, okay. In my journey to success, I've actually went through being an architect first. See, I studied architecture and I became one and I started practicing in the field. And the strange story about me is I have an extensive experience of 1 year employed, and then the company crashed. And I'll tell you now, this is the 10th year I'm running my business. So from only 1 year, and I've been running for 10 years now on my own. And to tell you that we do architecture, we are architects, and we are property developers and investors, and we also do the construction and then project management as well. So we provide those services. Now, to tell you perhaps how we ended up in property, It's because obviously we're doing architectural services, doing house plans, doing project developments, for clients and so on. And it has actually gone so far as we would be doing schools in the province, and we even do some work in some offices in Joburg as well. Eden Vale, we did some offices as well there. So, but along the way, I kept having a lot of inquiries from people wanting to do property development. They've earmarked this site, they want to do a development there. And I'll tell you, about 20 inquiries, maybe only one would actually succeed in actually becoming a development.
Wow.
So it then became a strain and a question to me as to why are these developments failing? Why are people coming to me asking me that they want to develop some flats here, some apartments there, they want to do a shopping center there, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really materialize. And that then led me to go on a journey and for myself to ask myself the question, what is it that people don't know about property development as a process, right, as a whole profession altogether, as an industry, that makes them think that to do a property development, you just do the plans and then suddenly, you're going to have this development. So they don't know the background to it. So that's how I actually ended up taking the path myself into teaching and learning more about property development. You see, and I actually
But Nzuzo, I like the fact that you questioned yourself, and there was a problem, and we all know that all businesses that live longer, you're 10 years into the business, now, they solve a problem. If you're not solving a problem, you don't have a business. Right, you've got an excitement curve of what is happening in the society at the time, but you're solving a problem. But I almost want to take you back, Nzuzo, long before you started working. Why architecture versus anything else? I mean, you're coming from the rural areas. When you're wanting to build, people don't come up with plans to say, no, the plans needs to be a house like this. It's a problem. We need a room, and the family is growing, and boom, we now start building, right? And it's a heart, and that's what we all know. And it's a heart. It's maybe it's just someone else who's now coming in with a different shape of a house, and we start building. That's what we know. Number one, resources are few. Number two, you don't have all the manpower that are skilled. But then you decide to go into something totally different from what is around you. And my question is, I mean, how did you? There are not many people of color that I know who are in your space in terms from a discipline. I mean, I want to look at 10 years ago, because that's when you were doing this, almost like 10 to 15 years ago. And I generally don't want to talk about color, but it's just the reality of where we are. What made you to go within that thinking? Because that's where it started off from, where nobody in your community is an architect. I don't know, maybe in your family there was an architect. You tell us.
No, I wish. I wish. Just prior to that, in high school, a family meeting was called because nobody knew what would actually become of me. When people asked me, they thought I was this guy who was playing games, just drawing, doing all these drawings, for fun. So art was seen
and Nzuzo, when you say a family meeting, what does that mean? Just give us a very practical meaning, because when they held a family meeting for me, on my mom's side, there's 10 of them. and 10 pitch up. On my dad's side, there's 7 of them, and 7 of them will pitch up. So this is all uncles and aunts that are coming in to talk about me. So the pressure that you get from there, I've had two family meetings. The one was just before I got married, and the other one was when I was telling them that, you know what, I'm going to the big city. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. So what was the family meeting for you? What does it look like?
No, at least it wasn't to that degree for me. It's just my parents, my brothers, and my sister who are much older than I am. I'm the second last born. So they were already in working, and my brother was already in university. So these are my years in high school. So it wasn't as hectic as that, but they were just concerned because my mother would keep asking, please speak to your brother, and so that he tells us what he's going to become, because I think in my family, it's all mainly teachers. My family, both my father and mother are teachers. And from all my mother's sisters are teachers. So most of us became teachers or nurses. So I was defying all of that and coming up with this name that they've never heard of. And everyone was worried, but what is this thing, And let me tell you, the offices I'm occupying, this is where I met the first architect.
Okay.
The offices that I'm occupying, this is the exact same place that I went when I was in grade 11 for experiential learning, to exposure, just to go. They ask you to go and see an architect, see what this person does and what they, what work they do. So you must imagine, I must have came here so many years back, but my first offices were actually open right here. So that man, whatever he did, it actually inspired me a lot. So to go back to what you were asking, I'm a creative person. I'm an artist. It's ingrained in me. So in how I got led to architecture was when you get to a time where you choose your subjects. And for me, I had all my school books, my math, science. As soon as I get confused by a sum, I start doing sketches, like 3Ds and everything, So to a degree that the teachers, there was a staff room meeting, they were all complaining about the same thing, that they don't have a space to mark the exercise, because I actually start drawing on the columns, and now they don't have. So it was a common thing. So when it was time to choose school subjects, it was easy, because they all said, you have to go and do art, technical drawing. You see. So, and by going in that direction, I was worried at first because I didn't know what would actually become of me. And that's when I actually got introduced to architecture. And that's where I saw my passion. There's one building that I saw, it is in England. It was done by a famous architect, Lord Norman Foster. And it's called, it looks like a box, a black box. And when I started describing that building, and I saw how they described it, that the building has a communication, has a language, there's a psychological aspect to it, it changes. Then I was like, wow, this form of art I'm attracted to. This is what I'm called to do. You don't just do a building and say a wall is there, but what's the philosophy behind that wall, So I started falling in love with that. And that's where I found myself in architecture, in the creating space, So that's where.
You speak of the Lord in England. And do you know why they were called, a person will be given the term Lord so and so?
I just know that it's an honorary name, and you must have done, exceptionally to deserve such a title. But perhaps I may not have read the actual definition. What is
so in general, back in the days, right? Like seriously, back in the days when these guys were calling each other lords and things like that. The thing is that there were those that are wealthy, and wealthy meant you need to have land.
Yeah.
And those that were the plebs, servants, and slaves is those that used to work on it. So you could never cross on the other side to be a landlord, right? So if you're a landlord, then you became Lord. Right? But I mean, these days it's so common now that many people have landlords. So the term lord now is kind of like diluted, but that's the general part of it. But it also comes with other accolades in terms of what you have done. Because bearing in mind that the fact that you are now Lord Nzuzo and you've got money, you can do other things now with your influence, obviously, right? And bearing in mind that in those days, just owning the land alone was something of high not significance, and it was coming from generations to the next generations to the next generation. In a nutshell, me and you are Lord, so you can address me as Lord Taurai, and you by Lord Nzuzo. All right.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
I like.
Having to speak about your journey, Nzuzo, now to a point where you now have a business. It came from passion. I mean, you cannot pinpoint to say this is where I started learning how to draw. It just came. And out of frustration, you would draw. That was your escaping moment. And with that, it actually became something tangible. And you went out there now, you started seeing, oh, actually, there's an architect. And you are now owning a business where it all started from. But I almost want to take you back as well to a point where when you were brought in here to understand what you understand, to the point when you got your first job. Because I think when you get a job, your parents and everyone else surrounding you now think that, yay, we've achieved. But then for you, there was no achievement, because in less than a year, you're out of a job again. And just walk us through that experience, man, of your first job, your first and last job.
Interestingly, my first employment, it was one of the most dramatic events. I've even heard other people recite my story, when they are in trouble. This is let me just give you the story. I'll paint it to you.
Yeah.
I come out of varsity. I have no experience, and I joined this company. And a few months in, I realized that all the pressure now is starting to get piled on me. This man, he shouts at me for things that my colleagues are doing, and they are much more senior than I am. They are more experienced than I am, And I found myself in a predicament that I'm so unfortunate. My boss doesn't like me. He seems to be piling all the pressure. And then he threw me into one of the most hectic projects, the most difficult projects that were in our table at that time. And that project, literally, when I went on site for site meetings, because there would be the contractors there, like we had 7 contractors on site. You can imagine the size of the project. And
as a first year, as a first year, you know nothing, man. You everything is just theory for you at the time.
It was theory. And literally, just before we stopped the car, we go on site, my knee I remember my left knee was shaking. It was like vibrating because I was so nervous, because I know these guys were going to eat me alive. They wanted information from me I didn't know. So that's how I got baptized in pressure. So, but I survived, and I pulled through. I rose to the occasion. As hard as it was, what it just meant at that time for me was, for me to prepare for a meeting, I had to spend 6 times more time than anybody, you know, just to seem normal. So I put in a lot more work. I would finish work at 11, and the following day at 4:30 or 5, I'm in the office. You know, so that was my life. Weekends, I'm in the office. And to a degree that I was called the son of the boss because I was always there, and he would shout at me, he would be pushing me all the time. And long story short, 7 months later, you know, I had actually rescued one of the projects in Shallcross here in Durban. It was such a headache of a project, you know, that, you know, they were actually thinking of just walking away from it. But then I went onto it. I actually rescued the project with my least experience. And immediately after that, I got my boss calls me and he says to me, hey, here's a big office, here's a chair, you are now a manager, a managing director in this office. You have rose to the occasion. You're taking all my pain, my frustrations away. And I've seen you that whatever I put through to you, it will get done. So I've got confidence in you. And I lost my words, I was shocked. So
Wow.
in a space of a year, I would tell people that I almost would say that I have an experience of 3 to 5 years in just 1 year because of the time and the kind of pressure that I faced, you know. So obviously at the time, one was still starting out, but the experience that I already gained was so much greater. You know, it was unbelievable, you know. So at some point, I actually went back to my parents, and I told them that, hey, look, this is not working out for me. You know, before, you know, the breakthrough, that this is not working out. My boss doesn't like me. I don't think I'm cut out for this. You know, hey, you know, it was sadness in the family because I mean, I've been training so hard for this, and finally, when the opportunity came, realizing that things are not actually what I thought they would be. You know, it was a lot harder than what I thought it would actually be like. So, but my family, my mother specifically, would encourage me through that because she knew I was a tough character. You know, I could handle quite a lot of problems by myself. So when I actually go back to her and say, hey, I've got a challenge, you know, she actually knew that this must be really overwhelming, you know, for me to complain, you know. But and there's a lot more from there, you know. So going up from there, unfortunately, another 4 months or so, 5 months, the company then went down. But the problem was the leader himself. I saw that he made some poor decisions, you know, and it taught me a valuable lesson that actually defined how I was going to run the business going forward, you know.
Right.
Because I saw the mistakes that he made, you know, I observed, I learned, and I saw that he wasn't relating well with his clients, you see. So, which then became a stumbling block to his growth, and it actually shut a lot of doors away from him, you know. So I saw for him, I learned from him a lot. So I learned a lot, quite more than what people would actually get. So I used that as my precedent, and I took it forward.
So Nzuzo, a couple of things that I pick up, man, from your story, and I see a lot of people running away from your season of learning. I see a lot of people, they want the success, but they are not willing to learn. They're not willing to be put under immense pressure. You know, a great book that I like to read, there's a guy called Joseph. He is born, he is told that he dreams that he's going to be great. But then throughout his entire life until around about 30, 35, it's just adversity over adversity. And then eventually he's like, he takes over the world and he becomes almost the president of an era. And in a very peculiar moment when there was drought for 7 years or so, and he becomes the person who distributes any of the foods that's there. And all of this that was being the pressures that he had from the time that he was born to run about 35, it's just basically preparation to where he was supposed to be, right? And I see a lot of people that run away from the pressure, but we don't know whether the pressure is building us at that time. We just call it stress, and we call it abuse. We call it all sorts of names. We run to CCMA. So there's lots of things that one could easily say, look, you know, I am in a space like this and nobody understands me. Some people even go through into, suicide mode because now they think that the world is against them.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, you didn't know that 10 years later, you're going to be having a company. You didn't know 10 years later, you're going to be in a space of employment and running your own business to become a developer and things like that. What gave you the tenacity to hang on? Because you could have left for another job. You could have. Why did you stay? Because I think that's where the challenge with in many of people's spaces, and like, I have other opportunities, so they jump on and then they go into it. But neither am I saying that we need to advocate for abuse in the employment. But how do you strike that balance where you can physically see that I've got an opportunity here to grind longer hours to learn, and anything else that is happening, you know, I'm going to shut it down and I'm going to continue learning. It's for my goodness. And I mean, I went through the same process as well that you're talking about, a little bit deeper though, you know, but in the fortunate part, I didn't have the abuse side. I just had people that liked me and they were like, do this project, do this project, until I started realizing that, no, hold on. If I continue just taking on all of this work, maybe I need to raise my hand and ask for more resources. And I did. And that's when I started managing people because they didn't object to it. But they never gave me the path to say, this is how you should do it. I had to think around it myself and start working around it. So in your view, 10 years ago or 11 years ago, when you're going through what you're going, what was the reason of you going through that?
That's one of the more important questions that one can ask in their lives. So I have this philosophy that I've grown into, especially if you look at a building, the higher the stories, the deeper the foundation. My question is when we're relating to the story of Joseph, I don't think many of us like to be processed, you know, to be prepared. You know, we've got this team at home that I tell my kids, they're still young, but I tell them that we must be prepared. You know, we rather be prepared for an opportunity and it doesn't come rather than, you know, opportunity comes and you're unprepared. So what you look at, what is important that we look at and we study, whatever the adversity that you are facing, is it actually building you or is it killing you? You know, if you are in a toxic environment where you can see that you are not growing in terms of your skill sets, you know, development as a person, then you can leave that place. But if you're in a position where they're actually piling a lot of work to you, that is actually positive, you know, that grows your leadership, that tests your leadership abilities. So that contributes to the foundation. It's just that unfortunately, many of us don't like the part where we're doing the foundations, where we're going down. So the deeper the foundation, the higher the building. So we have to take that philosophy into our personal development lives, into our own lives. That whatever you do, the harder it is, you know, definitely it means the reward will be bigger. I always use this example with my team, and I say, you must notice that if you knock on a door, if you knock on a timber door, your fingers won't hurt as much. But if you knock on a strong room door, the steel door, you know, you will hurt yourself. So that pain tells you that there's something much more treasurable in here. much more
Right.
valuable in life.
Right.
So we mustn't be afraid of actually going against the hard things in life.
Sure.
You know, so that's the philosophy around it that I always have. And in fact, having the passion and knowing and seeing and having the vision first to know where you're going, that is probably the key, because I think I had some images of myself driving an SUV and living in a nice house, you know,
Come on.
having a yacht, you know, you have those, and you say to yourself, you know what?
You forgot you forgot the beautiful Mrs.
Oh, the beautiful Mrs. And she's here, you know. Lucky to get her first before I could get all those things. You know, she's been kind to me. So you imagine your life, you know, and then you set a standard, and then you say, this is me, and you define it. And then you you just simply run towards it. You know, whether you crawl, you walk, you run, it doesn't matter, as long as you go into that direction. That's all that matters, you know.
Right. I totally love that. I think the question that I then want to ask, following to that, Nzuzo, is that with where you are right now today, you know, a lot of people might just be saying, you know, he was lucky. I get that a lot, you know, and yet there's lots of work that comes through into what you're doing, into your grinding. Your first project. So now you are out of employment. The company is shut down. You could have gone into an employment, but you decided not. You decided to carry on with a service offering. Now, how did you get your first contract then? You know, because I think that's a hindrance for many people. Yes, it's 10 years ago, but I think the principle still applies to today. I like the fact that you said, I learned a lot from my boss without him teaching you. You observed. And you observed what he was doing wrong, and you applied it into your life, into the opposite part of it. And I want to say to you, a lot of times in my growing up, I had many uncles within my space, and I observed them, and up until today, I know Uncle so and so does ABCD, and I'm like, never going to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned from them. And people generally think that when you're talking about learning from other people, it's generally in the, hey, my uncle said, don't do ABCD. Or my boss says, this is how you do it. You know, this is the path. But there's also another type of learning, which is, I see what you're doing, but I'm not going to do that. But if you've done it like ABCD, that's the path of success. So guess what? I'm going to take that. I'm going to run with it on the side so that I can be successful. And then you run it through, because you need to apply your mind around it. And I want to come back to that first contract that you got onto, and maybe just walk us through in terms of how did you then build from that first client to continuously have more clients? What has been the secret sauce over the last 10 years?
I think I remember very clearly what my first project was. And it was actually my cousin bought property. There was a new developing area in Pinetown. And took me there, and I did the plans for her, you know. And what I noticed there is there's actually still a new place, so there's a lot of room to grow. And then I decided that this is my opportunity. I'm not letting it slide. And I was in that place. I spoke to the agents, you know, the estate agents. Whenever they're selling someone the plot, you know, I had to make sure that my name would be the first card that they get, that I'm going to do, you know, the projects for them. So just that one area alone, I focused on it. You know, like laser focus, that I just became everyone's second name on their tongues. And it grew so quickly because I would make sure that I deliver, you know, on time. I gave them something they had never seen before. Because remember, where I actually started was much, much smaller than where I had already been exposed to. I was working in a shopping center. I was running a massive healthcare center as well. These are projects. I was doing large developments. But when it was my time to start, I had to go and start in a single family residential house, like just a 3-bedroom house.
Man, you know what, Nzuzo?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem with many entrepreneurs that are coming through from corporate.
Yeah.
That are coming through from employment. Because you were a young executive in the employment and because you were doing ABCD with the big projects. When you are now starting off on your own, you see the small projects as small projects. And I am always of the view, I always say, start small, learn fast, and grow fast. That's my thing. And I like the fact that you have said it, because there you are, when you was employed, you are in the big projects, you're speaking millions.
Hundreds.
But now you're starting off, and now you're starting off your own projects. These are thousands.
Yes.
And the question that would come in there from me is, why did you take on the small project? Why not jump onto the big projects? Because I see that as a big problem in our communities, and Nzuzo. People chasing the big projects and the developments but you ask them the one simple question: have you bought a 1-bed, 2-bed, or 1-bed, 1-bath? No. And I ask myself, so why are you not starting small? Because there's lots of lessons there that can help you when you're big. You want to buy development is one of the biggest thing that people come up with. Another one is they want to buy a block of flats. TJ's buying blocks of flats. So yes, I want to buy a block of flats.
Yes, I want to.
Okay, great. Yes, that's great. I didn't start from there. I started in a 2-bed, 1-bath. Have you bought a house? One house? No. How are you going to manage a block of flat now? 20 tenants. How are you going to manage that? It's practically impossible. And I apologize that I've just hammered on this point here, but I think you are a true testament of my ethos of start small, learn fast, and grow fast. But why did you accept that the singular projects as opposed to the big ones? Why didn't you chase the big ones? You had already an appetite for it. You understood it. In that time, 10 years ago, BEE would have gotten you through all the credentials to jump into the big projects. But you decided not. You focused on in the smaller projects on a one singular unit. I don't know. Were you charging 1,000 rand, 500 rand?
Like 10, like at that time, I think about 7.5K, but it was small money,
Sure.
But the thing is, we have to acknowledge that the vehicle that I was riding in was not built by me. So I had not the full understanding of every compartment and how it's put together. So it's easy to say so many things about someone else's things when you are questioning about your own. You have to understand how you build parts together. How the finance, how's the HR, just putting the whole thing, the technicalities. So when it was my time, that was one thing I have no regret, absolutely none, that I started where I did, because it gave me excellent time to process and learn and understand and see how this thing works, how my overheads are running, how am I able to meet my obligations? Okay, great, to a degree that even by the time I got my first employee, I knew that we could at least be paid for the next 6 months, So I had that philosophy and it went on. But I think about 8 months into me starting, boom, we landed our first big project. And it came through a client that I had done some minor extensions for their house. This guy was so impressed, and we've been, close ever since, because he then led me to my first schools, you see, and I took the opportunity. But here's the thing about these big projects people don't understand. They will demand that you have resources within you, that if you take it, they drain you out so much that they can collapse you, because you can't sustain. We had to run for 8 months before we got paid.
Right.
So you can imagine, how can you stomach? So because we already built a system, we had already built a business that can sustain itself over the months, I didn't feel the gap, that I was lacking in funds. I had to travel all around the province to visit these schools, do assessments. Who pays for the petrol? You sleep in B&Bs around, so it really is a bit capital intensive, and you have to wait. I'll tell you, the prints that you have to do are crazy. So, but leading to that, all those small monies, and I built a clientele that I had, like my bread and butter, that I knew I was turning over so much money a month. So definitely I will have that money, so I could survive easily. So
Nice,
when they came, it just fit into place. Then I scaled up afterwards, but I didn't scale too quickly. So I always allow myself to get processed accordingly. So that's my philosophy, because if you take on too big, especially when it comes to the property, exactly your point, as you were saying, that people want 20 flats, yet you have never managed two or one. You don't know the dynamics. You don't know how to manage the property. You don't know how to manage the utilities, maintenance. Deal with the headache of a tenant and understand, what are the problems, so you can anticipate. So all of those things. And by the way, to just extend on what I learned from my boss, is that when he got paid in those big projects, he went overseas, he went on trips, he just splashed the money. To a degree, he never invested. So his end was terrible. So this is where the investment part of me comes from.
Right.
To a degree, 3 months after he got paid, we would be sitting with no money in the office, and he would be telling us, "Hey, let's wait. We don't know when we're gonna get paid," and that's how we collapsed. So for me, this is the thing. When I finally got into investing, the first thing I tried to invest into was a disaster, and I think I lost the bar.
That's okay.
Man, but that was then. It was expensive school fees.
Either way, you need to learn.
It was
either you pay someone to give you the path, or you do it the hard way and you lose money. That's the only way to explain it.
That time I invested into commodities, but yet I later learned it was just a Ponzi.
Oh no!
And I didn't know, because I wasn't exposed, and I hadn't had the knowledge at the time. So I went down, and I think I went on to something else, trying to hook up with a few friends and put a deal together for a business. It went south. I think I lost there another 250. So eventually, when I came to my senses, and this is how I got into property, I was like, I think I've seen a lot of problems with this investment and other things that I do not know. What I know about property is, if I invest in here, the foundations are going to be here, the walls are going to be here, they're not going away, So it's the tangibility of property that led me to it, I didn't understand much more than that. So, but I knew the numbers, I knew how to get it built. I didn't know about managing, but I said, okay, at least it's going to be here, So that's how I actually use my experience, bad experience, turning it to positive,
Nice. What do you invest in now within the property space? You speak of investments. What do you invest in?
I'm a multi-let guy.
Nice.
I invest in multi-lets. You see, this is what I think I must shed some light. I'm inclined to development because it's closely linked to what I do. I like designing new things, you know. I like to build new things. I want to see them come up.
Sure.
And so that's why I'm a bit biased and you know, and I remember I then went on to some seminars, property seminars. I joined the Legacy, and I actually was coached by Warren Purcell. He's
Okay.
my coach.
Yeah.
And then I think it was 2 years or wait, not 2020 or 2019, late.
Yeah.
Then I joined Sapin, you know,
Yeah.
and my world has broadened